It was past 11 at night, but Monica Jefferson was in no hurry. She had spent the day in the courtroom, moving from case to case, her mind strained with arguments, evidence, and convincing closing statements. Now all she wanted was to fill up her tank and drive home. She stopped at a Chevron gas station in Birmingham, Alabama. Her breath mingled with the chill of the late night, as the yellow light from the high beams fell on the road, lengthening her slender but determined silhouette. The hum of the lights mingled with the occasional sound of passing cars on the nearby highway. When the gas pump beeped to signal that it was ready, Monica reached for the gas, her mind still somewhere between the pending cases and the glass of wine she had promised herself when she got home. She didn't notice the patrol car pull silently into the parking lot. Only when the car door slammed did she look up. 2 police officers stepped out. The older one had the hard look of a man accustomed to being obeyed, broad-shouldered, walking slowly but authoritatively. The younger one stood slightly behind, his eyes eagerly watching his comrades, waiting for instructions. She recognized that look. The suspicious, searching look. The look she was all too familiar with in the courtroom, when a jury looked at a black defendant regardless of the circumstances. "Ma'am." The voice was low. Sergeant Greg Matheson moved toward her, each step sure. "We need to see your identification." Monica paused mid-sentence, her finger hovering over the gas pump. She glanced around. There was no one else in the parking lot. No one else being asked for identification. Just her. "Why?" she asked, her voice calm but with a hidden edge. "Routine check," Matheson replied, his voice firm but methodical. She looked at them for a moment, her dark eyes gleaming with understanding. Then, slowly, she pulled her wallet from her bag. "I'll show you my ID." Her voice was calm, but firm. "But first, tell me why I was stopped." Barker, the younger officer, took a step forward, his expression confident but not without embarrassment. "We've received a report of a stolen black Lexus in the area." He glanced at her car. "Yours matches the description." Monica tilted her head, the corners of her lips curling into a humorless smile. She pulled out her ID and handed it to Matheson, her eyes unblinking as she looked directly at him. "Then you'll want to check it out. Because I'm Monica Jefferson, the state's attorney." The silence stretched a second too long. Monica saw it. The slight change in Matheson's expression, the stiffness in Barker's jaw. For a moment, just a moment, their suspicions receded, replaced by something else, belated realization. They hadn't seen who she was. They'd only seen the color of her skin. Now, they knew. Monica almost laughed. The situation was so ridiculous that if she hadn't been living through it herself, she would have thought it a joke. She'd owned the car for 4 years. The plates were registered to her, her insurance policy. And now her car was reported stolen. The irony was unbearable. She looked at Matheson, who narrowed his eyes, clearly not intending to let things go. "Don't make this difficult," his voice was firm but not harsh. A warning, a reminder that she didn't have much choice. Monica didn't budge. She'd dealt with worse than this. Murder trials, federal corruption cases, criminals with everything to lose. But she knew better than to argue in this situation. She was used to power and its abuse. She understood how far this could go. She took out her ID, keeping her face neutral as Matheson took it from her. Meanwhile, Barker circled the car, running his hand over the hood as if checking for evidence. "I need you to step out of the car," Matheson ordered. Monica's patience was wearing thin. "You have my ID. Check it. You'll see this car is mine." Barker paused at the driver's door, glancing inside. "Is that a work bag?" Monica followed his gaze. Her briefcase, the one she carried to court every day, was still neatly placed on the passenger seat. "Open the trunk," Matheson said. Monica raised an eyebrow. "No." He stepped closer, his gaze hardening. "Excuse me." You don't have probable cause. Her voice was calm, unwavering. I have the proper paperwork, and this car is legally mine. You have no right to search it. A flash of irritation crossed Matheson's face. He turned to Barker and nodded. Barker immediately put his hand on the radio. This was where things got dangerous. Monica had seen this scene too many times. She knew how quickly it could escalate. Mishaps, bad decisions could push things too far. Her heart was pounding, not with fear, but with frustration. She had spent her entire career fighting this. Holding officers like this accountable. And now she was part of the system she had fought against. Matheson crossed his arms, looking at her like a problem to be solved. Ma'am, we need you to step out of the car. Monica didn't move. She knew this wasn't the end of it. What if I refuse? Matheson's expression darkened, his eyes gleaming with cold determination. Then we're going to have to do this the hard way. Monica felt a shift in the air, as if the temperature around them had dropped a few degrees. The moment Matheson straightened his shoulders, his stance became stiffer, more aggressive. She'd spent enough time in courthouses analyzing the body language of police officers to know what was coming next. And it made her uneasy. I won't ask you again, ma'am, Matheson said, his voice tense, hard as steel as he stepped out of the car. Monica's pulse was steady. She had argued against men like him in court, exposed their defenses to juries. But here, in this dimly lit gas station parking lot, there was no judge, no jury, just unchecked power. Barker's hand hovered near his waist, where his gun rested. Tension flared between them like sparks between two wires. Monica could hear her own heartbeat, each steady beat as she calculated her next move. Sergeant, she said, her voice calm and composed, though her chest was filled with adrenaline. You know this is illegal. Matheson exhaled sharply through his nose, his eyes unwavering. You're defying a lawful order. There's nothing legal about it, Monica protested, but she knew it didn't matter. Facts didn't determine the outcome here. Barker moved first. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with a force that signaled that this was going beyond a routine check. Before she could react, Matheson grabbed her other arm, yanking them both behind her back. Are you serious? Monica hissed, twisting but not resisting outright. Stop. Don't resist. Barker's voice was low, but there was an underlying aggression. She wasn't, but they needed her to be. They needed her to struggle, to have a reason. To justify what they were about to do. The steel closed around her wrists, the click of the handcuffs snapping into place echoing in the silence. The cold of the metal sank into her flesh, a stark reminder that they held the power. You have no right. Monica growled, but no one listened. You're under arrest for noncompliance. Matheson interrupted, his voice hard. Monica clenched her jaw. This was textbook. Agitate the suspect, escalate the situation, justify the use of force. It was all predictable. They spun her around, pinning her against the side of the car. The rough texture of Barker's gloves scraped against her skin as he gripped her shoulders, pushing hard. The smell of oil and metal filled her nostrils, mixed with the feeling of helplessness she hated. But she couldn't let them see that. She wouldn't let them win this way. Barker took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Monica. Is there anything about you that I should know? He asked, his voice low but strained. Monica slowly patted her coat pocket, the movement so deliberate that it made the air around her heavier. She said nothing, just stared straight ahead, her eyes showing nothing but determination. Inside the pocket, she felt the edge of her wallet, cold and familiar. Check her wallet, Matheson ordered, his voice firm but uncertain. Barker stepped forward, his hand hesitating before he pulled Monica's pocket open. A small leather box fell out, and he picked it up and flipped it open. The fluorescent light glinted off the gold seal, along with the embossed words, State Attorney's Office, Chief Prosecutor. Matheson stared at the words, the tension on his face slowly fading to horror. He snatched the box from Barker, scanning it. There was a long silence, broken only by heavy breathing. Monica stood still, unfazed. "You're making a mistake." Her voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to each word. Matheson blinked, trying to process what had just happened. Barker shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flicking from Monica to Matheson. "Sergeant, what do we do?" Matheson hesitated. The truth hit him like a giant boulder. They had just arrested the woman who was overseeing the investigation into their own department. Their folly was now a tightening noose. "Take the handcuffs off." Matheson's voice dropped. Barker stood still, as if he couldn't believe his ears. "I said, take the damn handcuffs off." Matheson growled, angry not at Monica, but at their own mistake. The metal scraped as the lock opened. Monica rubbed her wrist, red marks showing on her skin. She didn't look down, but kept her eyes on the two men before her. Her gaze was sharp as knives, quiet but dangerous. Matheson forced a tight smile. "It's a misunderstanding." But Monica didn't smile. She slowly retrieved her papers, stuffing them into her coat pocket, her eyes never leaving Matheson. "Yes." Her voice was low, each word emphatic. "But misunderstandings don't come with handcuffs. And this isn't over." She stood still, her wrists still aching, but she didn't care. They were the ones feeling the weight of this moment. And it would weigh on them for a long time. Mathematics looked like a man who had just stepped off a cliff, without realizing it. Barker, younger and greener, continued to move on his feet, like a variable that was constantly shifting. His fingers twitched at his sides, like numbers that had no rules, that followed no clear system. "This doesn't have to go anywhere," Matheson had said, his voice forced into something like supreme control, like an indestructible system of equations. "Go on, Monica. Let the words sink in, move on." She had spent her career fighting for those who never had a chance to move on. Like functions locked in limits, pulled out of geometrical charts, plunged down from variations and isolated variables. "You held me for no reason. You handcuffed me, you conducted an illegal search, and now you want to leave." Matheson swallowed. "We don't know who you are." Monica narrowed her eyes. "And if I wasn't the DA, would we still be having this conversation? Or would I have been in the back of your cruiser?" Neither of them answered. Barker finally looked up, his face uncertain, like an equation with a broken logic. "We were just doing our jobs." Monica let out a sigh, like a graph bending under the weight of a calculation. That effort. That lazy, tired effort. She took a step forward, lowering her voice just enough for them to hear. "You think this ends here? You think because you took the handcuffs off, it all goes away?" She faced them, like a set of exam papers waiting to be explained. "How long have you been on the force?" Barker hesitated. 5 years. Monica turned to Matheson. "And you?" His jaw clenched. 18. 18 years, she repeated. "Long enough to know better." Matheson exhaled through his nose, his hands on his hips, like a diagram ready to transform. "What do you want from us?" Monica tilted her head. "I want you to remember this moment. Because, the next time you pull someone who looks like me." Monica stood before them, her sharp eyes scanning the faces of the two men. The air between them was heavy, as if the air itself bore the weight of the confrontation. She could feel the tension in the way Matheson clenched his fists, in the way Barker's gaze wavered. "You two have made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice low but sharp as a knife. "And I am sure, by morning, you will feel the consequences." Barker swallowed, his eyes flicking to Matheson as if waiting for some kind of direction, but there was nothing but a long silence. Matheson took a deep breath, but when he opened his mouth, no words came. The truth hit them with terrible force. Not only had they stopped the wrong man, but they had also just confronted someone they should never have messed with. Barker's radio crackled to life, breaking the tension. A voice came from the other end, asking for a status check. Barker hesitated, his hand resting on the communicator as if it weighed a ton. Matheson looked at him, his eyes filled with an unspoken command. Finally, Barker pressed the button, his voice hoarse. Unit 2 to 7, all clear. Monica watched them, a flicker of regret in her eyes but quickly hidden by her composure. She tilted her head, as if in acceptance of the truth, and said, "Good. Now, I suggest you go home and think hard about what just happened." She turned, walking toward her car. But just as she touched the door handle, Matheson's voice rang out, deep and careful. "Wait. Which department did you say you worked for?" Monica turned her head, a smile flickering on her lips but cold as steel. "You'll find out tomorrow morning." She slid into the car, closed the door, and started the engine. As the wheels rolled away, she didn't need to look in the rearview mirror to know they were still standing there, stunned by the new realization. Their world had shrunk in a way they'd never expected. The next morning, Monica sat at her desk, case files stacked in front of her. She glanced down, flipping open one of them. Barker and Matheson's names appeared on the first page. The irony wasn't lost on her. For months, she'd been reviewing complaints against officers in the Birmingham Police Department. And now, she'd just become part of that story. Each sketched out patterns of racial profiling, excessive force and illegal stops. Each one filled with the names of people who had been humiliated, arrested, or worse, wronged by police. And now, her name was in one of those files. A knock on the door pulled her out of her thoughts. Her assistant, Clara Rodriguez, poked her head in. "They're here." Monica breathed, coolly, "Send them in." The door opened wider, and Chief Walter Grayson stepped inside. His expression was tense, unreadable. Behind him stood Internal Affairs Investigator Samuel Owens, carrying a manila folder tucked under his arm. They wasted no time in pleasantries. Grayson cleared his throat, "I've seen the footage." Monica's fingers tapped the edge of her desk. "The gas station cameras caught everything." "I assume you saw the part where they handcuffed me," she said coldly. Grayson's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm not going to defend them. What happened last night was unacceptable." Monica tilted her head, her eyes sharp. "Then you know what happens next." Owens put the folder down and opened it. Inside were the disciplinary reports. Matheson's and Barker's names were stamped on them, along with the complaints. Monica glanced down. "How many?" Grayson hesitated. Monica raised her head and looked him straight in the eyes. "How many?" Owens spoke instead. 14 complaints against Matheson. 9 against Barker. Mostly racial complaints. Monica let that sink in. "And they're still patrolling the streets?" She put her hands on the chair, leaning back. "You know, when I first started looking into this department, I had a theory." She clasped her hands together, her eyes deep. "I thought the problem was the system. The leadership was turning a blind eye. Grayson was ginger, listening. But last night, I realized something else." Grayson's eyes flashed. "And what is it?" Monica looked straight at him. "It's not just the system." She frowned, her voice hard. "It's officers like Matheson and Barker, who think they're invulnerable. I'm putting them both on administrative leave." "That's not enough." Monica interrupted, her voice as sharp as a knife. Owen studied her carefully, as if trying to read every line in that determined face. "What do you want?" She leaned forward, her eyes shining with impunity. "I want them off the force." Monica's voice was firm, without hesitation. Grayson leaned back, his hands clenched. "Monica, you know how hard it is to fire an officer." He tried to keep his composure. "With the union's protection, even with footage, the appeal process could drag on for months. Then make sure they don't appeal. Her voice was sharp, each word an irrefutable command. Grayson breathed heavily, his hand unconsciously rubbing his face, as if trying to shake off the heavy pressure. Are you asking me to throw them to the wolves? Monica's expression didn't change. Her eyes were as sharp as knives in the cold light. No. I'm asking you to hold them accountable. Owens shifted in his seat, the tension in the room tightening like a net. If we charge them, the whole department will be affected. It's been scrutinized. Monica let out a short, bitter laugh. You're worried about the department's image? What about my image? I've been handcuffed, humiliated, and illegally detained by 2 officers with a history of misconduct. If you think I'm going to let this go, you don't know me. A long silence filled the room. Grayson took a deep breath, as if preparing to enter a storm. What charges are you proposing? Monica didn't hesitate. Wrongful imprisonment, misconduct, and abuse of power. Grayson's shoulders slumped, knowing there was no way to avoid the truth. Owens nodded slowly, as if finally accepting the inevitable. I'll draw up the papers. Monica stood, her eyes never leaving them. And one more thing. Both men looked up at her. I want a press conference. Grayson frowned, wariness flashing in his eyes. Are you sure about that? Monica's eyes darkened, her voice low but commanding. I'm done with quiet arrangements. It's time the public knew exactly who was protecting them. Because if Matheson and Barker could do this to me, a woman of power and influence, what were they doing to those who had no voice? She paused, letting each word sink into the tense atmosphere. This isn't just about justice. This is about making sure it never happens again. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras flashing. The gallery was filled with spectators, community members, activists, other officers watching in silence. At the defendant's table, Sergeant Greg Matheson and Officer Kyle Barker sat motionless. There was no power, no badge to shield them. Just the judgmental gaze of the public and an undeniable truth. Monica stood there, unshaken, unafraid. She was fighting not just for herself, but for all those who had been trampled upon. And this time, she would not let silence be the answer. No, sir. The manager replied they just wanted. Matheson shifted in his chair. Barker bowed his head. Barker was called to testify next. He hesitated, glancing at Matheson. Before finally standing. And was moving toward the witness stand. Briggs leaned forward. Officer Barker. Let's talk about that night. When you approached Miss Jefferson. What did you suspect her of? Barker gulped. When a stolen car was reported. Fits the description. Briggs raised an eyebrow. Did you confirm the report before approaching her? Barker didn't hesitate. Not at that moment. Briggs stepped closer. So you had no real reason to suspect her? Barker moved us. Just wanted to make sure. Briggs turned to the jury. Wanted to make sure that was the reason. Not probable cause, not evidence. Just a hunch. He turned to Barker. At what point did you realize you're in custody? The state's chief prosecutor. Barker's face was red. After we ran her. And yet he still handcuffed her. First there was a long pause. Barker finally mumbled. Yes, Matheson's attorney protested. But the damage was done. When Monica took the stand. She spoke clearly and firmly. I've spent my career making sure that people are treated fairly under the law. She told the court. These officers treated me like a criminal first. A citizen second. The only reason I'm standing here today, instead of in jail, is because of my job title. That would scare everyone in this room. Her words hung in the air. Matheson's face was stony. But Barker looked smaller. Like a man who realized too late that he was ruining his life. Briggs turned to the jury. The law was clear. It is clear that these men have abused their power. Now it is time to hold them accountable. Matheson and Barker never thought this day would come. The verdict came sooner than expected. Monica sat motionless as the jury foreman rose, cleared his throat, and then announced loudly. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts." A moment of eerie silence fell over the room, as if everyone had held their breath, before being broken by a wave of whispers. Reporters were scribbling furiously in their notebooks, some even turning on their tape recorders. Matheson's shoulders were tense, his fingers gripping the edge of the table as if he would collapse if he let go. The mask of indifference and arrogance he had always worn had fallen for the first time in his career. Barker, who had always been a shadow beside Matheson, let out a shaky sigh, his eyes staring blankly at the table, as if he wanted to disappear from reality. They both understood that this was more than a verdict. This was a collapse. The judge's gavel pounded on the wood. Sentencing will be scheduled for a later date. This case is adjourned. As soon as the judge rose, the room erupted. Cameras flashed, reporters swarmed in, voices overlapping in a sea of chaos. "Miss Jefferson, do you feel justice has been served? Do you think this case will set a precedent? Do you have anything to say to the defenders of Matheson and Barker?" Monica, who had been dealing with the press since the early days, stepped up to the microphone with the same composure she had carried since she was handcuffed that fateful night. She scanned the crowd, then spoke, not high, not harsh, but strong enough to cut through the noise. "Let me be clear. This was never about revenge. This was about accountability." She looked directly into the camera, letting her words sink in with every viewer watching. "This case matters because it proves what we've always known: when the system doesn't work, bad guys get away with it. But today, we prove that no one is above the law. No officer, no badge can hide the truth. But justice shouldn't depend on a courtroom, a high-profile trial, or a victim's title. Justice should be for everyone, all the time." The words hung heavy in the air. Matheson and Barker couldn't look away, couldn't pretend they hadn't heard them. Monica looked directly into the camera once more, addressing not just the people in the room but everyone in uniform who believed their power knew no bounds. Sergeant Matheson and Officer Barker thought they could act with impunity. That belief ended today. And if there's anyone else out there who thinks the same way, let this be your warning. With that last statement, she stepped back, ignoring the onslaught of questions that followed. Justice had been served, but her fight was far from over. Matheson and Barker had been officially stripped of their badges. Barker, in a lesser role, received probation and community service. Matheson, with a long history of misconduct, faced a sentence he never thought he would face. For the first time in their careers, they were no longer the ones standing above everyone else. They are just two people facing their own consequences. That he was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. For the first time in his life, he would be on the other side of the law. And victory was hollow. Monica sat in her office a week later. Her eyes stared out the glass window at the city that moved on, as if nothing had changed. But she knew that something had changed, not enough, not much, but something. For every case like this, how many others were not heard? How many were stopped, searched, arrested, humiliated? How many never had a chance to fight back? The questions echoed in her mind, like a wound that wouldn't heal. She reached for the file on her desk. Another lawsuit. Another complaint. Another name added to the long list. She exhaled, slowly opening the file. Because justice isn't a single moment. It was a war. And she wasn't done yet. What happened to Monica was nothing new. Too common. But what made her case different was that she had power that most victims don't have. She had a voice, a platform, a public spotlight. But what if she had been just an ordinary woman of color? Someone with no identity, no badge, no influence, just a human being trying to get home? Would those officers have apologized? Would they have let her go? Or would they have continued to justify their actions, continued to legitimize the violence, until she too became just another statistic? Another case buried under piles of documents. Another misunderstanding forgotten. This story was never just about two bad officers losing their jobs. It was about a broken system, a mechanism that allowed people like them to exist and thrive in the first place. And if so, how many others are out there? How many more victims must be suffered before there is real change? If you believe in accountability, if you believe that justice should not depend on status or skin color, share this story. The more people who see it, the harder it is to ignore. And if you haven't, stand up. Because the fight isn't over. Not yet.